Welcome, listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Friendly reminder, when you're tuning in, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or you can watch our lovely faces on YouTube. I'm Jim Galizia, and this is Victoria Fragnito. Say hi, Victoria.
I'm not doing the joke.
Hi. I keep setting it up, and she won't just say, hi, Victoria. She won't do it. Terrible.
Not happening. We did the joke a couple times. It's dead now.
Okay.
So today on the show, we're going to be joined by our day player, Joe Pomarico. Joe is a director, a writer, a cinematographer, pretty much an editor, a jack of all trades. He's going to talk a little bit about his short film projects, his feature film, Mentally Apart. And he also suggested that we watch his favorite film, Once Upon a Time in the West, a spaghetti western. And it's actually considered an epic, I think, because of the length of the film.
Yes, it was certainly epically long. Weirdly enough, upon doing a little bit of research into it, realized that when it came out, it was released in Italy or overseas, and it was 2 hours and 46 minutes long. And when it came to America for the American release, they were like, Americans aren't going to sit that long, and they shortened it. So there was a shorter version released for America, which I thought was interesting. But still was like 2 hours and 20 something minutes, which is still a very long time. Personally, for me, most of the time, if you're not returning the ring to Mount Doom, your movie shouldn't be pushing 3 hours. You just should. It's too much, you know?
I don't know. You haven't seen a lot of classic epic films. They don't do films like that anymore. So
they don't, and there's a reason. Because
not necessarily
fans got shorter. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have a longer movie. I just think, I think Vine ruined it for everybody. Everyone's like, look at this 6-second film I made. It's like, I can't even watch some of those before I'm bored. But I loved, I almost said A Million Ways to Die in the West.
I know there's so many
spin-offs, credit to the movie. Because there's so many spin-offs and so many things that kind of poke fun at it and reference it. And I think that is, can attribute to the fact that it's like a classic because everybody still thinks about it, still talks about it, still makes jokes about it, still references it, still is influenced by it, which Joe has said he is. So, we'll definitely hear more about that. I definitely wanted to also mention what a spaghetti western actually is, because this is basically one of the titular spaghetti westerns that are out there, is Once Upon a Time in the West from 1968. A spaghetti western, essentially, when you call something a spaghetti western, you're saying it's a movie about cowboys made by an Italian. And I think that's a little fucked up that became a thing. It's actually in Asian countries like Japan, they call it a macaroni western. That's not a joke. So it's the equivalent, I think, of saying COVID-19 is the Chinese virus.
I mean, I don't think it's quite as bad as that, because one instance is saying the Chinese created a worldwide pandemic and the other one is saying Italians made a Western movie. So I don't think it's quite the same thing, but it's definitely not great.
Well, I don't know. It comes from China. Horrible Trump impression. But it's not saying like, oh, it's the woohoo dumpling virus. It's saying it's the Chinese virus. When you say spaghetti western, I don't know, it's a little weird, but it's now a commonplace term. It's not offensive. I'm just joking. But I just thought it was funny. When I read this, I was like, that can't be the reason. And then I looked it up and I was like, holy crap, it is. So a spaghetti western is really just a western made by an Italian. So that's kind of funny. But, funny little tidbit there. Joe has said that he's influenced heavily by this movie. So yeah, on that note, let's just bring Joe in and talk to him about his films, and we'll show his director's reel.
You want to try, Joey? Now, give me a hand. You gotta keep it steady.
You remind me of me when my father gave me this watch. He told me not to be afraid. Open their eyes.
Open your eyes.
Okay, we're here with Joe Pomarico. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do. What do you do? How did you get in the industry? All that stuff.
I guess go back to when I wanted to do what I do. I started young when I was 7 as a painter first. And I was always obsessed with movies and making movies. And that's obviously never left me. And once I graduated high school, then I went out to college. And I went to college to kind of utilize the equipment because I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to use to make a film. And then right on my last year of college, I met someone. Her name was Winsome Sinclair. She's a casting director. And she became like a second mother to me. She was a guest speaker at the college, and I waited till after her lecture, and I went up to her and I said, I'd like to, show you some of my work. And I just wanted to like talk to her, on a personal level. And we became so close ever since. This was back in 2009. So I showed her one of my short films from the school. And she was like, she really liked it. And she's like, I'm going to give you my card. And like that summer, I reached out to her and she's like, I want you to come and meet everybody at Spike's office, Spike Lee. And so I started out after school being Spike Lee's assistant because of her, working on some productions, and then here and there working in the corporate office. And I got really close with everybody over there at 40 Acres. And that's really was like my push. So like Winsome gave me my push start in the industry.
Very cool.
Yeah. So from there, I wanted to obviously continue writing my own work and directing, because that's my main thing, writing, directing, and I edit pretty much all my work too. So I started, should I go into like the projects or some things I started with?
Yeah, I mean, well, you said you started as Spike Lee's assistant, so tell us a little bit about that. What were you doing? Were you like getting coffee?
Well,
Spike Lee? How does he take his coffee? Is my question.
Well, I mean, like, you got to make your bones. Let's put it all out there to everybody that wants to break in or do anything in this business. You need to make your bones. So I did start out as an intern. And we happened to work on a commercial for Rockaware at the time, and with Jay-Z. And so I got to intern on that. But, the thing is, though, is that these guys on these sets, they pay attention to everything you do. If you hustle, they'll know you're hustling. And what turned out to be a non-paid internship turned out to be paid, because they saw I'm like running with a table on my back, like those big, long, like whenever they need something, you got to move. Don't complain. Don't do nothing. This business is not meant for people that are going to just like, half-ass it, Are we going to keep it G-rated, or should I,
No, you can curse. That's okay.
All right, cool.
We've said worse on this show.
All right. So don't fuck around and just do your job. Yeah. Yeah. So that's how, it's kind of like what sparked a relationship even further, because then they wanted me to stick around. It's good when they ask you to stay around rather than,
Yeah.
But you got to do that by keeping your mouth shut and doing your job, and they will notice that. They will recognize it. So that's a little advice for people just starting out. And Spike is really cool. He's very down-to-earth dude. He's funny, and took me to a March Madness game, which was fun. I don't want to talk all about that stuff. I'm not like those name dropping, bragging, this, that.
We did one episode with somebody else where we were just like, it was like a 10-minute sequence of, oh yeah, you met this person? Oh, I met this person. We just were name dropping so long, and we were like, let's stop, because we're just our asses a little bit. But that sounds really cool. I mean, yeah, I think 90% of what you bring to the table when you come onto a film set is your attitude, especially in the start, because you can. That's why when they talk about celebrities sometimes having attitudes, everyone remembers the Christian Bale rant when he randomly picked out a grip and was like screaming at him because he was adjusting a light. I don't know if you ever heard it, but
yeah, I heard it. It was because he was in his eye line.
Yeah,
I mean, I
kind of like focus and be not method, but he was trying to be in the character, and he can't when there's a dude holding a light in his face. So
when you're moving it around.
Yeah, but celebrities get attitudes because they've established in the career. When you're new in the career and you're trying to like make a name for yourself, 90% of it is just work hard, hustle, just keep moving as much as you can. Even just look busy. If you're not busy.
Well, yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is that with celebrity, when you're working with celebrity, there are some that are like divas, and I won't say names, but there are, they're very chill, but they're professional. That's the thing. That's how you know they're professionals. When it comes to the independent film community, I find that there's a lot more egos than there are in Hollywood. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Not to talk down about, but like, there's, I think, I've said this in another interview where I think that sometimes an attitude adjustment might need to be changed a little bit, because there's people like, yes, you make movies, yes, you do this, but they just, how do you explain? Do you guys know where I'm going with this? Or no?
I think I'm getting where you're going.
All right. Well, I mean,
We've had discussions too on the show where we talked about people that have been in the industry so long where it's no longer fun for them. And at the end of the day, you got to think like you could be, mining coal or flipping burgers at Burger King or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with those things. It's just
no.
you're working on a movie, and that's fun. No matter how hard you're working, it's still fun. And
right.
Actually, there's a line in The Disaster Artist, which is, the movie that made fun of The Room with Tommy Wiseau, James Franco. And I think the line was something along the lines of like, even your worst day on a film set is better than any other day at any other job, because it's still, you're making movies and it's amazing. So when people work in the industry so long and they get so jaded and they show up and they have a bad attitude, it's like, you got to pull it together, because you're working on movies. You're making fun stuff happen. So. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a fast-paced, think on your toes, like, don't hesitate, come up with the solution immediately. Like, if that's too much for you, this is not for you,
Yeah.
I gotta ask, so what was your first like independent project that you did by yourself after you worked with Spike's team?
So my first independent short film was a film called Gus. Did you guys get to check it out yet? Or
I watched Mentally Apart. I didn't get a chance to watch Gus yet. Yeah, but I did watch. I watched the feature.
I've seen Gus, but I saw it a long time ago, because I'm actually business partners with the lead actor in it.
Yeah,
Michael.
That's right. Mike.
So we have this weird connection we didn't know until I was like watching your reel, and I was like, I know that guy. He has a lot less hair now, but I remember him. But I own a film and video business with him. I'm wearing the shirt, actually. I just realized.
Plugs.
Shameless plug. But yeah, that's a funny small connection. The film industry gets smaller the more you talk to people, you meet people,
It really does. So yeah, I mean, Gus is a short film that's inspired by my true story of me and my grandfather. My grandfather was an artist as a hobby. He was an oil painter. He painted landscapes. And when I was 7 years old, he taught me how to paint my first painting. And so I was very close to my grandfather, probably the closest to my grandfather than anyone in my childhood. And we paint a picture, and then we rent 2 movies. It itself is about the time we spent and how it came from him nurturing my abilities to eventually taking over the throne in a sense, I guess. So in reality, the true story of him is that a year before he passed away, he gave me his watch. And I noticed, like, I never wore the watch, but I kept it on my dresser. And I noticed that the time was slowing down, whereas I guess the battery was just dying maybe or something. But there's something in my head that I just like had this weird prediction. And when my grandfather passed away, I heard this story from my grandmother talking to someone at the wake and saying what had happened and when, the night he passed. And she mentioned it was around the time, like around 11:15 or so, when I won't go into all the details, but the fact is that I went back and looked for the watch, and it turned out the watch stopped at the time.
Mm.
True story.
Yeah,
and
that's a sad story. But if that doesn't inspire you to get creative, flow, and make something out of it, and it sounds like you made Gus out of that. So I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so Gus is pretty much inspired by that story in time, and I used the pocket watch and instead for the film, as well as the way he died is not at all how he passed away in real life. I just did it to tell a more visually compelling story.
Yeah.
So that's a very special piece, and it was my first independent short. John Rosario, the director of photography, Richard D'Angelo, the executive producer. So it's a very special film. And
it was tough to take this very real story, this thing that happened to you, and adapt it and change it? Because you said you changed the way he died and the watch. Was it tough to make that decision? Were you like, was it
no?
You, or?
Well, I mean, no, I don't think it wasn't tough. Like, see, like, the thing is, like, when I have, like, what I did was I did capture, like the exact, like, feel and look of, like, how he was in his last days in his house. Like, my family members, my uncles and aunts were like, tears, they couldn't believe, like, how it just looked like him, his mannerisms, is this. I just absorb all those things, where it was just, like, very easily for me to translate that onto the screen and work with my actors, Sal Richards, Mike LaMarca, Anthony Perini. And yeah, it wasn't a hard thing to do, you know, because I just I don't know, it's just like, it's like, it's what I wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it was something where it's like, I always thought to myself, like, I don't want my grandfather dead or anything, but I wanted to be the one to be there for his last words. And I think that's something that always stuck in my mind, because he was sick for a long time. And I was almost like mentally prepared for that. So instead of, obviously it didn't happen that way, but I managed to it kind of just organically happened naturally. Like, you know, I wrote it in like a week, you know.
I think sometimes when you're writing about real life stuff, which I do a lot,
mm-hmm.
you know, even though you could say this is exactly what happened in real life, it doesn't always serve the story that you're trying to tell, or the pieces that
right.
you're trying to pull out of it. So
mm-hmm.
I know, at least for me, that changing those things, the first time I wrote something that was based off of real life, I was like, but this is how it really happened, but it didn't really serve the story so much.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas,
right.
you know, now it's easier for me to be like, well, this is what really happened, but this is the story I'm trying to tell. So
right.
easy to change those things.
Yeah.
I have to ask you for Mentally Apart. That is
mm-hmm.
a feature film that you made for only $7,000.
Yes.
Which the cinematography in that, the shots are beautiful. And when I was looking at
thank you.
the credits for it, you did a lot of the stuff. You did about everything on that film. So I have to know where you're doing so much. You wrote it, you directed it, you did cinematography, you edited it. Like, that's
the cinematography, like Steve Glassner and I teamed up, because he was there only a certain amount of days, and then it was just me. But it was an ambitious project. I'll admit. You know, because normally, like, my other short films, My Butterfly and This Love, I'm not going to veer off to those, but with Mentally Apart is like, that's just always what I do. It's what I do. I write it, I direct it, I edit it, because I love every aspect of making a movie, and I have already in my head how it's going to be done. So it, like, you know, going through somebody else to do it, it just won't work, or it just cause a headache, or just take too much time to get it done. But it was it was overwhelming, because I was, at the computer for about 8 months putting it together, and then teaming with Sacha Blank, who was the composer, and, his incredible music for the movie. And we would, go back and forth and talk about scenes and, get everything exactly the way we want it to be. But yeah, that's It's just what I love. And and I don't even like. That's the thing too. It's like people ask like too if like do you enjoy what you do and stuff. I mean, I love everything, every part of it. Like, does it seem like I enjoy while I'm doing it? Maybe not, but it's because it's like I'm. It's almost like I'm programmed. It's like this is what I have to do to get it done. And
yeah, I was just
it's
watching an interview.
I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry.
You did. You did.
Oh, okay.
I was just
you're passionate about it. You're serious about it. And so sometimes that can come off as like you're not enjoying what you do, but it's just because this is what you're passionate about, and you want it to be done right. And I can completely understand. It's hard to collaborate with other people when you're so passionate about the project. You want to make sure that they care about it as much as you do, and that you guys are on the same page. And so I can completely understand why it's easier then for you to kind of take the reins and do these things yourself, so that it can come out the way that you want it to.
Right.
How long was the actual shoot for it?
The shoot?
Not all post, but all the just shoot dates.
Well, it was 11 days, but I want to say like Christine is my wife and starring in the movie, and her great. And I collaborated with like everything with the story and stuff like that, and a lot of ideas are her ideas in the movie. So that's like the first real collaboration that I've done with her, and so we would go back and forth with ideas, but all in all, but it was 11-day shoot. We shot, and the thing was too is that we had a lot of things against us. The camera was broken. We had a camera that would overheat after a minute and a half of recording. So think about all those intense emotional moments that I had to like cut short, because what happened was the internal fan that would go on while it's recording to keep it nice and quiet and cool was broken. So eventually the motor would just go.
That's what you want.
So
we had to ADR a few scenes.
Worked on short film once where someone had a similar issue, like the camera was just so loud that they wrote into the film, they wrote that the refrigerator was broken, so that the fan or like the freezer was overheating or doing too much or something like that. So that they could be like, oh, this darn appliance is really not working. So when the camera was like overheating or doing whatever the fan was doing, they could like explain it so they wouldn't have to adjust the sound or anything. It was not, but it was funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's like the nightmare of the day, when you get the sounds all messed up. But then also, because of the fan, the timing, getting it done, like it's kind of like you had to pick your shot and stick with those shots, and there's no other shots left because you're running out of time. You don't have any money. And that's that. And also, like, we didn't have a big arsenal of equipment. The dolly I built with hand truck wheels. Larry and I built it with just took hand truck wheels and put on plywood, but that didn't work out so good because it was creaking and all that stuff. But listen, you do what you got to do, and you try to make it work as best as you can.
I mean, all of the troubles did not come through in the film because the shots are beautiful. They really are.
Thank you. There's so many more I wanted to do, like different kinds of things. I always say, like, it's you're never satisfied. That's the thing. If you're satisfied with what you accomplished, then that's the thing is, thank you. I appreciate that. I just, I wish that it was built on the soundstage. So I could move a wall and put a crane overhead or something, you know what I mean? But I mean, it came out. Yeah. I am happy with it. I am happy.
Well, good. How did you end up getting it on Amazon Prime? What was that process like?
Oh, that's Amazon is very easy for anybody to put it on there. I mean, right now it's only available in the United States, UK, and Germany. But when Amazon allows anybody to, you make an account with Prime Video Direct, and as long as you follow the guidelines, like they ask for like 3 pieces of key art, the movie's got to be a certain resolution. You put in your cast, and then you submit it. Your captions have to be on point. If your captions aren't on point, then it takes a while to get published. But that one good thing about Amazon, yes, it's good for independent filmmakers to bypass the distributors and the sales reps and stuff. They can put it on. They're not going to get on all the platforms, and they're not going to get it in 150 countries. But to start, or if they can't get a distribution deal, it's still there for them.
Good. That's really good information I know there's a lot of, people who listen to this podcast are part of the Story Filmmakers Club, and a lot of them,
right.
Wondering, how do you get your stuff out there? So that's really good information.
Yeah, and promoting social media, I would build a following before you release it too, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, things like that.
Yeah. So what's anything coming down the pipe for you? I know right now we're in quarantine, so it's a little difficult to be getting out there and doing stuff, but what do you have?
Those writing skills, sharpen those editing skills.
I'm writing a script right now. Can't talk about that one yet, but I can. The next project I mainly want to do is a Western I wrote in 2015. It's inspired by my wife and all women who have been victims of sexual assault. And I wanted to make a movie that has a strong female lead, base the story around her, who gets revenge on the men who betrayed her. And on top of that, she finds herself going a little too far with her feelings of rage from betrayal. And she decides she wants to start a new life, but because of everything from her past, she has to. It's not an easy escape to paradise, I guess we can call it, where she can live a life of free of being on the run. And so it's like, there's a lot of social and political undertones as well in the film, in the script. But like I had there's an agent I freelance with. He showed the script to some producers, and they said, "You have a Tarantino script, but who's Joe Pomarico?" Greatest compliment.
I almost envision it like Django, where
that's the thing is
vengeance. Yeah.
The thing is, like, when I talk about it, it's like, like, yes, what happened was I kind of channeled my anger and rage about women being assaulted to like this character, to like just do all the things that I like, would like to do myself to these guys. But so I don't want it when you talk about those things too, because it's a very sensitive subject. I don't want people to also think that it's just like a very like touching drama. It's still like a fun, bloody revenge Western, and it's witty. There's comedy. You can't really put it in any genre because it's got every element in it. And because you want to entertain your audience, but you want to also hit them with some real messages.
Yeah,
but,
I completely get that. My first point has a lot. It's all based off of that. It has to do with the PTSD that women deal with after something like this happens. And you have to balance heavy stuff like that with other elements. Otherwise, it's just 2 hours of torture for your audience. So obviously you need to balance it with other things. But I think it's awesome that you're, promoting women's stories and female leads, because I know a lot of times, for women, female leads tend to just be, they'll be the bombshell in the corner that shows up to be naked for no reason. So it's good that you're trying to. You
and Christine will get along very well.
Send me her email. I'd be happy to talk to her.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was just saying, because it's like I talk about, like, even in my pitch deck, with the movie, there's there's things that, like, you're not going to erase someone's nightmare memories of being assaulted, right? Or abused. But it's like, I picture, like, them seeing it on a screen and just being like, yes, that's what I wanted to do. Like, or wish that, like, cheer them on, like, to, like, get that sense of relief, like, where you're not manipulating the mind to feel better, but you know what I mean? Like, just someone to root for, a hero in a sense. And then,
it's nice to, see your story represented on screen, and to know that others have been through the same thing you have. And even if it's not the exact same, like if, you didn't get the chance to confront your assaulter or, exact revenge on them, you still, there's a little bit of catharsis in watching that story get told. So I think that's a worthwhile project for sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, and also too, I do kind of add in the element of, like, where not every guy is a bad guy. Where it's like there's also the there are, like, it basically, it's like I also show, like, we've all been through some sort of heartbreak. We've all been through I don't know, it's just a very human movie, I guess I could call it, you know what I mean? But mainly with the sexual assault, but it's just, all in all, I try to, like, make, if you can make everybody relate to something in it, even though they may not have experienced what the main reason why she does what she does, I think they can feel more connected to understanding, their, what they go through, or, like, the trauma that they've been through.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Okay. No, absolutely it does. So where is this at right now? Is it just the script is written and you're kind of shopping it out to see, like, get producers on board, or where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I've had several meetings with, people, and trying to get, we don't have any funding right now. That's the thing. Right. I've written this in 2015 and, and made some tweaks here and there, but all in all, I've been trying, I have people I've been working with to try and get some sort of meeting for investments. And, I wanted to at least try and shoot the opening scene this year, just to maybe use that. But as of right now, we have no scheduled, nothing set up. Like, we're kind of, like, up in the air right now. But that's like my baby. I want that made so bad, So it's just a matter of,
well, that's all of Earth right now. We're all kind of up in the air, just waiting for COVID-19 to blow over. So now's the time to have that be up in the air too, because you never know what's going to happen. So it sounds like a worthwhile film. Like, I would watch it. It sounds fun. Obviously dealing with all the serious tone.
Yeah, I mean,
taking them lightly.
Yeah, I mean, I one compliment I've gotten was from women that have read the script. They're like, "This sounds like a woman wrote it. How did you do this?" You pay attention. That's how you.
Was it a situation where you were like,
pay attention
scene, and then you showed it to your wife, and if your wife was cool with it, then you were like, all right, then it's fine.
Oh no! When I see her read it and she starts tearing because she feels it, then I know I did a good job.
There you go. That's approval in a good weird way, I suppose. So so your film that you're writing is influenced by westerns, and it's a perfect segue into telling us why you chose Once Upon a Time in the West from 1968. So what made you choose that movie as our movie to talk about?
Well, it's just my all-time favorite movie in general. Mainly because, probably every element in there, the cinematography, the acting, the makeup, the wardrobe, I think it's just one of like there's not many movies where you could say that was done perfectly. And I think that's one of those movies. Gianetto De Rossi, he's the makeup artist in that movie who did, all the makeup, did Claudia Cardinelli. uh, I actually got in contact with him, and he's on board with our Western to do the makeup, but he's all in Italy right now. But you know, there's things about it too that, especially if you want to just go into just the genre of Westerns, is that I think that nowadays everybody who attempts these types of movies, everything looks too clean. I don't feel anything. I don't smell where these people came from. I don't, you know, I don't see a tear in their clothing from an armadillo, or I don't even know if they bite, but you know what I mean. Like, you know what I mean? There's no depth to these characters and all these.
You can tell sometimes too, when you're watching a movie or a show, you're like, they just bought that from the store. It's never like a worn outfit, like, or they actively trying to burn it or something. And you know, there's 8 different copies of exactly the same burnt up shirt right next to them in case they use it up. So sometimes you feel like you taken out of it because you're like, it's too real, and you want to see just
like nobody looks. Yeah, a lot of people are look very dirty in the West. I mean, they live in dirt out there. You know what I mean? There's nothing that's clean. Even walking to the saloon, or you know,
I comment all the time when there's like an action scene and someone's hair is perfect right after it, and I'm like, fuck yeah, your hair would not be looking like that right now. Your hair would be all over the place. You just blew up a plane or whatever movie I'm thinking of. But
exactly.
This all felt really real, and because of how slow it was too, I feel like all the sound design of it was really what sold it a lot of the times, because you hear drops falling, like raindrops, or you hear, I think in the opening when the raindrop or the leak in the ceiling,
best opening in any movie, the suspense that he creates, where you just don't know what's gonna happen. Sergio Leone has that way. You know, he doesn't have many movies, but he knows what he's doing, and that's what got me more like intrigued about him. Was I kind of felt like, you know, there was some similarities the way I felt, and I was like, I didn't know any other people were like this a little bit, but because when I learned more about him, you know, he's the kind of director that knows exactly what's going to be on the screen. He knows what sound he wants. He knows kind of what he wants the actors to do. Like and that's how I am. Just any actors. I don't want anyone to think that I'm the kind of person that just, you know, doesn't let them do what they feel they prep for. But when you look at my short films, like I'm very specific with body language. You know, it's like if you have a certain line, like I'm gonna have you most likely like hold the glass a certain way that you're holding, or you know, turn at this moment. Like that's, you know, one way of like telling the story and moving the camera, and you got to have your actors kind of flow, like just like a synchronized thing, to make it that much more appealing to your audience, I guess. And that's how I am. I'm very specific, and that's what he is. Because like, I think you could see an interview with Robert De Niro from Once Upon a Time in America, and he was like, "Sir, just tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it." And because he just had a specific way of him like doing, as he delivers his lines, like, I want you to do this and move like this, and then right here.
So there's balance on set when you're working on a film set between the technical aspect of like behind the camera and the front of aspect, like I was about to say front of house because I've worked in restaurants too long.
Yeah.
But when you're an actor and you're in front of the camera, you have to deliver and make it feel real and authentic, but you also have to like do things like hit your marks and have the right eye line and all that. So yeah, all the things you're saying make a lot of sense. There's a balance. I think there's a balance between.
Well, yeah. Also, I think, you know, I've noticed like when I've worked with actors, you know, to help bring the performance out even further. Sometimes you give them a little something to do, whether it's with their hands or, like, if you find like a little, like it could be like a fidget, or something, anything to make it as natural as possible. I mean, that's just because I feel like when it comes to communication, when someone's communicating, obviously with somebody on screen, they're also communicating with body language and they don't realize it. And I think focusing on your body language as well as delivering lines is very, very important.
Yeah.
Well, I can see actually a lot of influences from, I watched the Once Upon a Time in the West before I watched Mentally Apart. And as soon as we got into the first scene for Mentally Apart, I was like, I see a lot of influence from, setting the atmosphere and trying to like really create a whole world without talking too much, without, it's all about the atmosphere. So I can see a lot of influences in your work. If that's your favorite film, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You want to create that suspense. I feel like if in the first few minutes, you want to create like a million questions for your audience, right? Just to get the mind going. And then as long as it takes it like an hour and a half to finally to start removing those questions and till they finally get answered, keeps them on their toes, keeps them on the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Joe, we're going to post all your links. We're going to post your website, your reel. People can check out your work, see some of your films. Mentally Apart is on Amazon. They're going to check out your short film, Gus. What else did you bring along? What else can we show off? We'll show it all.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you want to do. I did want to go back and say one thing, if it helps, whether you edit it out, no big deal. With Mentally Apart, for people that want to make a feature, a lot of people are writing features and they haven't made one yet, and they're big budgets, features that they're writing. The thing about Mentally Apart is what sparked Mentally Apart was that we've always had the Western going, and that requires like a $10 million budget, and we know we're not going to get $10 million right off the bat, especially that would be my first feature too. So I was saying to Christine, it's like we got to do something that's marketable to show what we can do. That's why $7,000 is all we could get to make this movie, but it was also an experiment too to just show that like what we can do. But you got to, so when you're thinking about making your first feature, I recommend come up with the story where you're limited to your resources and utilize those resources. So it's like, what about two people in an apartment? You don't got to pay for a location. That was Larry's apartment. Minimum equipment because there's nowhere to put it, if you're just shooting inside. And see how well can you entertain everyone with just a few actors, which was just the two, like, minus the feature guys. So I mean, that's another thing, advice, if you're gonna make your first feature too, like write something where you can have minimum locations and that you can do it for practically nothing and still come up with a very high quality product.
Right, for the resources you have, not the resources you want to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And then
I'm still working.
That's solid advice for.
Epic. I need a spaceship.
You need what? A spaceship?
For my sci-fi epic.
Come on, do it. Stanley Kubrick designed all the space models and stuff, the ship models and everything.
Yeah.
You know that? In 2001 Space Odyssey.
I'm not.
That's the thing too. It's like you don't even need CGI. You just got a ship. You know what I mean? And then and actually build prop. What?
George Lucas, he made the first Star Destroyers out of egg cartons.
Yeah. It's really like if all household items, you can make that happen if you really put time into it.
They used to do it a lot more with miniatures. Yeah. They would build very tiny versions and just film it like it's the real thing. that's how they would cheat a lot of different scenes.
And not to hate on my visual effects friends, but those miniatures look much better than the digital stuff.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Practicals. I'm all about practical.
Yeah.
I'm definitely with you on that one. Well,
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your work and for picking such a great movie for us to watch and pick apart. I can't wait to see what you have coming down the pipeline.
Thank you. And I, thank you both for, having me on. And I look forward to hopefully meeting you guys at one of the group meetings. And when this is all over, and hope you guys continue to stay safe and healthy.
Yeah, you too.
And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
All right, thank you to Joe Pomarico for joining us, and let's talk about Once Upon a Time in the West. Let's get into it. So this is actually my first full-length film Western, like classic film Western that I've seen.
Yeah, I never was into Westerns. My uncle's pretty into them, but it's kind of a thing, like, I can't really say I'm not into Westerns because so much of spaghetti Westerns and those types of movies, they influence so much in filmmaking today that it's kind of crazy to say I'm not into it, because if I'm into modern movies today, these movies are influenced in some capacity, and most of them, by this movie and similar movies like it. In fact, in 2009, the film was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant, which is an interesting factoid. How I personally felt about the movie, it's long. It's super long, but I wasn't bored at any point. I was surprised, because anytime you tell me that a movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes, I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah, I was a little intimidated by the length of the film before I had watched it. But you get to that opening scene where these gang members go to a train station. They intimidate the ticket taker into hiding, and they're essentially waiting to take someone out when they get off the train. That scene just set the tone for the entire film. And the way the director, Sergio Leone, right? Yeah. The way he used sound and atmosphere just to set the tone for the whole film in that first scene was pretty incredible. It built so much suspense. You didn't know why these guys were there, but you knew that they were nefarious people. You knew something was going to go down. And that is a lot of the film is, the waiting and the suspense building before something happens. And then the action happens and it's quick.
Yeah.
And it was all that build up for that quick payoff. And then you're in the next moment where you're building suspense and you're waiting and they're building this world. But when I was watching it, a lot of it reminded me of these old classic epic films with big practical sets, lots of extras, lots of actors. It really brought you into the whole world, and I love that there wasn't CGI, there wasn't any of that stuff. It all felt so real.
Yeah.
I thought it was visually a very stunning film. I think it was shot really well. I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I liked it. And I wasn't checking the clock the entire time that I was watching it. I assumed that I probably would be because it was, almost 3-hour film, but it was
really
well
done. I wasn't checking the clock either, but at the same time I was like, good God, this is a long movie. But it wasn't like it upset me. Like, it was good that it was long because it lets you sit in these moments for too long.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can pick apart the opening scene a little bit, and if you haven't watched it, go take a 3-hour sabbatical and then come back to this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But the opening scene, at least, the guy standing under the leak in the ceiling, and the leak is just hitting him in the head. That's like a whole minute of just that little bit, that basically the one shot of the leak hitting him in the head, and he puts his hat on. He's just cool with it. He doesn't even care because his priorities are, I'm about to kill a man, So he doesn't care about a leak. This other guy sits down and he's got like a bug crawling all over his face, and he's just like, doesn't even care. I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of lets you know little weird things about these characters. And then, spoiler alert, Harmonica shows up, and I thought he was really interesting. I related him to being like Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2. Immediately, I was like, oh, that's the protagonist, that's the hero. Because at first, too, any movie that opens up on certain characters and spends, 10 minutes at least, building them up and giving you an idea of who they are, you assume that they're the heroes of the story.
I actually didn't assume that he was the hero at first. It wasn't until we got further and we found out that Henry Fonda was the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it's interesting because they essentially had 3 main cowboys that were the leads in the film, and plus the female lead, was the only real female in the film. But I mean, it's a Western from the 60s. I'm good at it, I guess. But I didn't, there was Harmonica, there was Cheyenne, and there was Frank. And Henry Fonda played Frank, who is a hitman for the railroad magnate. But Cheyenne was the leader of a gang as well, who was
O'Driscolls.
from the law. Huh?
It's the O'Driscolls.
Yeah.
That's 100%. I'm just, so if you don't know Red Dead Redemption 2, some of these references I'm bringing up make no sense. But basically there's a very similar gang of cowboy rebels types called the O'Driscolls. And they're basically all the Cheyenne crew from this movie. Same thing. Same exact scenario.
But I just didn't, it took me a little while to kind of realize who was good and who wasn't. Because even after Frank ends up, spoiler alert, it's from 1968, not that much of a spoiler. Frank ends up killing this entire family, which he wasn't supposed to do. He was just supposed to intimidate them. The railroad magnate wants their land because the railroad's going to come through that area, which again sounds a little like Blazing Saddles. But even though he killed all those people, I was like, okay, he's bad, obviously, but I didn't know who the protagonist was. It took a long time for me to figure that out. Until
Harmonica shows up, and once Harmonica showed up, I was like, oh, he's the good guy. But then he does things like intimidate a bunch of people at a bar. Like, it wasn't a bar, it was just like this weird building where everybody met up, like an inn or something. And
it was like a stop on the road, like a place, like a watering hole kind of situation.
Obvious criminal with handcuffs on comes in, intimidates everybody, and Harmonica just intimidates him right back to his face. And you think like, I don't know if the good guy, it's kind of like a Han Solo vibe where he's like good, but he's a bad person, like kind of a mix of both.
He's a smuggler, he's a criminal, but he's still the hero,
Right. But then at the same time, I got a real different vibe when the female character in the movie, he just starts ripping her shirt off and being super strange.
Right, like I didn't understand.
It felt out of character, but then it was like, oh, this is maybe a bad person doing something. Because in the end, spoiler alert again, he's not there for the money. He's not there because if it's the right thing to do. All he wants out of it was to get revenge. And to get revenge on, what's his name? Frank? Yeah. So, I mean, basically Frank, they reveal via flashbacks that Frank murdered his brother. Cutting ahead to, years later, they don't explain this until the very end of the movie. So it's like really strange that this character was portrayed as like the hero, but then along the way they were showing some things like maybe he's not exactly the hero you're expecting or whatever. But
see, that's where I disagree with you. I don't think any of them were necessarily portrayed as, except for Frank, obviously being a hitman and killing people. He had no real redeeming qualities, whereas I think everyone else was they portrayed them as human beings. You know, they were flawed. They were either good people doing bad things, you know, they were in a bad situation. But I don't think any of them were really portrayed as like the hero. You know, I did see it, you know, at the end when it's the final showdown between Harmonica and Frank, where, you know, Harmonica's in mostly white and Frank is in mostly black. Obviously, you know, there's that kind of subtlety. But for me, I don't think anyone really came off as like the hero of the story.
No, I agree with that. If anything, that's the twist, where you're thinking he's the hero the whole time. And then this guy he's, you know, actively trying to get revenge against, there's this whole shootout where all these other guys are trying to kill him. His own men are trying to kill him. And he like helps him survive the thing, because it's not the way he wants to get revenge. Like, it's almost like, you can't kill him, I have to kill him.
Right.
It's not like a good person thing to do. So you're not really a good guy, but you're helping a bad guy, but also you're gonna kill him. So it's a weird, they definitely tried to like portray these characters in a certain light so that you would be confused as to who's who in the story. And no one's really the good guy here.
Yeah. There was very little about this film that I didn't enjoy. I didn't enjoy that unexplained violence against Jill. I don't understand why Harmonica roughed her up and you know, shoved her down and like ripped her clothes. Like, that made no sense to me. I didn't understand. I know Joe was a big fan of the makeup artistry, and I think for the men, the makeup was really good. For the female, which I feel like this happens in a lot of films, she had full mascara and eyeliner in a Western. They didn't have those things. Like, that's not, they maybe had rouge, but they didn't have like eyeliner and fake eyelashes. Maybe that's just a picky thing, but I don't like when women in films are meant to be there to just be pretty. And it felt like that's one of the things about this one singular woman, is that she's there to be pretty. Her character obviously had a lot more depth, and the story about her was very, very interesting. But, you know, there's a scene where her shirt is open to here for no reason. You know, she's got perfect makeup all the time. They're in the dirt. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm. Her hair is always magnificent and perfect. Well, let's comment about that straw hat she was wearing for the longest, because that hat looked stupid.
I mean, but that was actually pretty historically accurate.
Yeah, and it looked stupid.
I liked it.
Yeah, you would wear that hat?
Not today, but if I was in a Western, I would wear the hat.
Right. Next podcast, wear that hat. I double dog dare you.
Where am I going to get that hat, Jim? Where am I going to get that hat?
I don't know, but your whole role here is to look pretty. That's the only thing you're here for. Speak your mind, get slapped in the face. That's what it's for. 1875, that's the year. Trying to also kind of do that voice, which I can't do. I feel like people of modern day have kind of lost that like old-timey radio voice that they all naturally have.
Well, I also think that was like very like 40s and 50s. I was just playing, getting a little off topic. I was just, Mafia games have been re-released for PlayStation, and Mafia 2 was remastered, and that takes place during the 40s and 50s. And obviously, the radio announcers are modern day actors, you know, just doing these announcements for a fake city and fake events that happen in the story. But I was like, wow, they really sound like, I didn't feel like it. Sometimes you forget like people don't sound like that anymore, and like that's definitely an affectation that you have to like put on your voice in order to sound like that.
I wonder if people naturally sounded like that, or were they actually doing the voice because it was like the radio voice? So they thought, because it's on radio, maybe I have to translate that to TV or movies. I don't know if people spoke like that because of it. The old-timey like, hi, thank you for tuning in to the AFC Podcast. My name is Jim Galizia. It's a very strange way to speak.
Yes. But that was the style. But getting back to Once Upon a Time in the West, the only other thing I didn't enjoy about the film I love Henry Fonda. I think he's a fantastic actor. And I know they went against type with him to be the bad guy. I had a hard time believing him as the bad guy. It was just, not to say that his performance wasn't good. It was solid. It was just, I know that, at least for me, they were trying to kind of blur the lines of like who is good and who is bad and who's doing things. But Frank, that character, was pretty straightforward. They were out for themselves all the time. They, killed that was their profession, was to kill people. And Henry Fonda, I think, just kind of lacked a certain edge to really be the bad guy. I think that there's room for his interpretation of what evil men or bad people are like, but he's not necessarily, very few actors are complete chameleons where they can play, wonderfully, angelic people and also like the, worst evil people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know him as well, but it almost seemed like they cast Mr. Rogers to be a bad guy in a Western. And it was very strange. I mean, but Sergio Leone is known for that. He's known for casting people against their type, going for the unexpected kind of behind the scenes wise. And then, the truth is that a lot of their acting performances are pretty, it's almost like it's drawn out to an extent where he's like standing there for a straight minute uncut. So, credit to where credit's due. You can't do that if you're not at least good. I feel like if movie was made in modern day, it would have been easier to cut up that performance and make it shorter and tighter, and that might aid the performance possibly, or maybe, I don't know, make it.
I don't think so, because it was just his embodiment of like, even though you are an actor, you're still bringing you to every character. Like, you can't hide everything about yourself. You can change some of your mannerisms and you can change the way you speak, but it's still your voice. It's still your physicality. And you could just kind of affect it a little, you can affect it. Some people can really, really transform with every single role, like Meryl Streep and stuff like that. But some people are, that is them. Like Tom Hanks knows that he's not going to play a villain. That's not who he is. He's like, I'm too nice to ever really play the really, really bad guy. I think the closest he came recently was that movie, The Circle, with Emma Watson, where he was like a tech guy who was like the bad guy. But for the most part, he's very comfortable in like, I'm the nice guy. This is who I play. This is who I am.
I've never seen The Circle, but all I think of when you say Tom Hanks, I think Forrest Gump, Woody, and I think Castaway, and he's screaming to Wilson. And just nothing about that is like, oh, he's the villain. I can't. Yeah. So, I mean, literally one of the most loved characters in animation is Woody. Mm-hmm. The goodest guy.
The goodest guy. But I mean, I just didn't completely buy him as a bad guy. And I don't think that any modern editing or like cutting the film down to like, it's his performance that just inherently, I didn't believe that he was like, I didn't quite buy him as kind of a selfish, ruthless leader of a gang in the West who's out for himself. I mean, not that he
created it too, because I mean, the opening scene where Frank shows up and kills the whole family, and the guy said, or he kills 3 of them, and then the little kid is there. He's maybe 10 years old, and the guy says, "Frank, what are we gonna do with this kid?" He says, "Well, now that you said my name," and then he shoots the kid. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the writing definitely helped it, because there's kind of a thing where in filmmaking, if you want to set up the villain, there's this tool, not a tool, but it's almost like if you wanted to set up the villain, how do you introduce this person and let your audience know this is the villain? You have them walk in and kick a dog. And that's exactly, you just made that face, means you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. To my core, I'm like, no. And it might not necessarily be kicking a dog, literally. It might be shooting a 10-year-old and killing a 10-year-old. It might be anything else that just makes you immediately go, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
No? Or girl. It's 2020. Women can be villains. Get over it.
Get over it. But those were the only, I mean, and not that I hated his performance by any stretch of the imagination. It was just, and like, these are really nitpicky things to not like about the film. Overall, I think it was masterfully done. I can see why it's, so ingrained in, film history and why it has such an influence. I mean, even, doing research on the film after the fact, so many filmmakers have said that this film has influenced them. You can see Tarantino is definitely influenced by this, and he has said it. George Lucas has been influenced by this. I can't think of his name. Martin Scorsese.
Yeah.
Yes,
Scorsese
Martin Scorsese. Vince Gilligan from, creator of Breaking Bad and all that stuff. You can see how this has influenced them in the choices that they make behind the camera and the way that they choose to tell the story. And I think it's, it's just a testament to really planning out what you're going to do and knowing what you want out of a story and out of a film. And it doesn't matter that it's almost 3 hours long. I didn't get bored with the story. It was a little hard to follow at times because there was so much space. But once you got to the end, like, everything kind of fell into place.
Yeah. If anything, I feel like the flashbacks with Frank in the past killing Harmonica's brother, maybe those could have been a little more integrated into the front of the film so that we kind of get like, oh, that's what Harmonica's deal is. But I think your confusion is also translated to, like, you just don't know yet, and it's kind of hyping it up.
Right. And like, Frank spends the entire time asking Harmonica who he is. So I think it's nice that we don't know till right before Frank knows who this guy is and why he's after him.
But then also puts us in Frank's shoes, who's clearly the villain. So now we're in the shoes of the villain for that story arc, which is kind of strange because normally you're in the shoes of the hero of the story. You're kind of following them along. But because we're asking the same questions that the villain is asking, it creates a weird dynamic where you're kind of like confused and trying to figure it out. But maybe that's what they wanted, when they came up with how they were going to put it on screen. It should be noted too that Harmonica was originally supposed to be played by Clint Eastwood, the godfather of all Westerns, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
But he turned it down for whatever reason, and then it went to Charles Bronson.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Bronson.
I think all the performances in it were very good, very solid. I think it's just a very well done film all the way around. Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was great. Apparently when this movie came out, it was not well received, which we're just going into this pattern again. If you guys have been following the podcast, it seems like every movie from before the year 2000 came out and was just not doing well. But it almost seems like couple years after this movie came out, all of a sudden it had a cult following and it was considered one of the best in cinema, and people talk about it like it's the greatest movie. Rotten Tomatoes has it rated 9.16 out of 10. So it's kind of crazy that when this movie came out, it pretty much flopped.
Roger Ebert gave it like 2.5 stars when it came out.
It got 4.
Yeah.
It should be noted that the budget for the whole film was $5 million, which in 1968 went a longer way, but still that's not that much. And, I mean, considering most of the film is pretty tight-knit, there are quite a few big wide shots where they're building a railroad and they have a train. So there's quite a few things that probably cost a pretty penny. And in the box office in the U.S., they only pulled in $5.3 million. So they basically turned a profit, but just like barely. Mm-hmm. But it should be also said that it was released in France and Italy and Germany and a bunch of other places before the U.S. So they definitely turned a profit. They made significant money, but not where you wouldn't consider it a flop, technically. But then now it's considered like a cultural classic. Like we said, it's selected for preservation by the National Film Registry. It's, considered one of the best westerns of all time and influences much of modern TV and film. So it's kind of crazy that these movies, you know, we keep doing these where there's a podcast where we're talking about a movie and we think it's great. We have issues with it and stuff, but the reviews for it, we look it up and it's like it made no money and people bashed it. But now today people still watch it and think it's great. Yeah, it's very strange how that happens. I don't know if that's maybe they talk about too, like the audience is getting smarter over the years as filmmakers get more advanced with their techniques and their storytelling. And, you know, back then, if you put that movie in theaters today, no one would have fucking seen that. No one would have wanted to see it. It's so slow. It's a slow burn, and it earns it because of the payoffs and what it builds up to and how it does it. But if you put that movie in theaters today, select people are going to go see it. And the vast majority of audiences have seen so many other movies that are so much more fast-paced. And I think the general audience is more desensitized, or not desensitized, that's not the right word. They've kind of adapted to the styles of film that we're putting out today. Disney's audience. That's who it is. But, you know, you can't even compare this type of a movie to something like Avengers. There's no comparison because it's such a slow burn. There's like 4 titular characters that are important, maybe 5, which too, what's his name? The guy who owned the railroad was Churchill, which is straight from Red Dead Redemption 2. His name's Morton Churchill.
Ah.
So he's pretty much the guy running the railroad, same exact from Red Dead Redemption 2, where you're stopping his trains and he's pissed off. But yeah, it's crazy because all the westerns, they could have all happened because of how limited they are. Like there's only like 5 main characters and how they all relate to each other. They all could have happened. It's kind of crazy that these things used to happen and people just would shoot each other and nobody would even react.
Oh yeah.
They'd be like, oh, there's another shootout. Let's keep going to work.
Well, in the scene in the bar when you first meet Cheyenne for the first time, he comes in and, you know, he meets Harmonica and he gets Harmonica to like shoot his handcuffs off.
Yeah,
that
the other
scene,
guy took his handcuff off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the other guy. Sorry, Cheyenne is playing that, or Harmonica's playing his harmonica and kind of like instigating him a little bit. But literally, as soon as all of that, which was a lot, you know, that was a lot of time. As soon as all of that was done, the bartender goes right back to hitting on Jill in the film. Just immediately,
that guy was from Brooklyn. Like he was. Well, yo, I gotta go down to New Orleans. Like, get out of here. That's, if you know the comedian Joey Diaz, that was that guy. If we're recapping this movie today, that's who would play that guy.
I mean, it was an Italian film it was Western, but almost all of the actors except for like Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, who played Cheyenne? What was his name? He won Academy Awards. Look it up, Jim.
Jason Robards?
Yes, Robards. Jason Robards.
Yes.
They were all, except for, I mean, even the lead female, Claudia, the actress, Claudia, she was Italian. You know, everyone is Italian. So whether they're like straight off the boat Italian or they're Italian American, who knows? But like as we're watching the opening, and this film did what a lot of older films used to do, which is put all the credits at the beginning of the film. Instead, so you have to sit through all of them and you have to acknowledge all the people. We
were like 10, 15 minutes into the movie and they were still like visual effects supervisor. Like it was still coming up. I was like, Jesus Christ.
But it was just all Italian names. Just all Italian, all actors, Italian.
Yeah, I probably said Tortellini like 4 times and I wouldn't have noticed. You know? Joseph Tortellini.
There you go.
Robert Linguini.
Okay, now we're getting a little.
Meredith Fettuccine. I'm hungry. So
Let's have Italians talk about spaghetti westerns and not talk about pasta. I don't think that's possible.
I know. The more we talk about it, the hungrier I get. Like, I'm gonna go eat as soon as we're done with this, which is great. But the idea too that spaghetti westerns were a thing, and that Italian Americans came over and said, we're just gonna make westerns, but we're only gonna cast Italians. Like, it's funny. I think it's funny almost. I wish that they would go a step further and be like, well, I guess this doesn't make any sense. I was about to say like a Japanese Western, you know, and have a bunch of Japanese people come over and just dress up as cowboys and just do a Western and not acknowledge the fact that they're all Japanese, not explain it.
I
feel
like
a samurai movie, so it's hard to do that because they basically, Westerns and samurai movies are very similar in that they're very slow and drawn out and they build tension, and then there's a really intense sword fight for like 2 seconds. And then it moves on.
I mean, I think there's definitely room in the genre of westerns, like especially because out in the West, there's multiple different types of people. There were, immigrants from all over trying to find their place and tame the West and grab their little corner of the world. So I feel like there's lots of room for different interpretations of I get diversity in Westerns. It doesn't all have to be, dirty white dudes, doing a shootout at the OK Corral. There's a bunch of different things you can do with it. And I kind of wish that there was more films in Westerns that do talk about all the diversity that was out there. Sure, a lot of it was really bad in the way they treated, the freed African Americans and the Chinese immigrants and all of that. But I think there's room for great storytelling about some of these real people that were out there and kind of forging their own.
Right. Well, let's write it.
All right, done.
We have a perfect understanding of the Chinese American experience.
Yes, better than 2 Italians.
Yeah. 2 Italians. We'll make it a spaghetti Western, but we'll rope in some Chinese stuff as well.
And on that note.
Thank you guys for tuning in to the AFC Podcast. We appreciate you guys listening or watching, whatever you want to do. But you can watch on YouTube. You can listen on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. And I'm Jim Galizia.
I'm Victoria Fragnito. We want to thank Joe Pomarico for joining us, for sharing with us his work and the projects that he's already done and stuff that he's got coming down the pipeline. You can find out more about him. We'll link all the stuff at the end of the show. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.